Hey, what's up there, YouTubers and those who may be watching this on Facebook? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a video review. And that for this review, we're going to be taking a look at Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Full disclosure, I was one of the folks who originally backed this game when it was launched on Kickstarter back in 2015. And just want to let you know, any opinion I have about this game is my opinion and my opinion alone. So anyway, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night for the Nintendo Switch, also available on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC via Steam, but we'll be focusing on the Switch version. And if you're interested in any gameplay footage, I'll have a link in the description. Plus, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the new Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But before we get started on this, we're going to do a very quick My 2 cent. And this one has to do with a story that broke yesterday that I didn't get a chance to put into my 2 cent video. And that is that Bethesda announced at QuakeCon that Doom 1, 2, and 3 were available to download on, I believe, the PS4 and the Nintendo Switch. For those who are not familiar, these are the Doom 1 and 2 are the original classic 1993, and I believe Doom 2 came out in 1995. I'm not 100% sure, but these are considered like the games that helped started the whole first-person shooter genre, though, and I was able to download some of these games, and I played it out for a little bit, and while it may be a bit definitely dated and primitive to some people, though, they still are enjoyable and fun games, nevertheless, even if they are not what first-person shooters are for today, and they're definitely worth taking a look at. Doom 3, I played a little bit of it. I remember playing the PS3, that was the BFG edition. I think that was the big freaking guns one as well. And that one, I think they tried to do something a little bit different. That was sort of like a retelling of the original Doom, to be exact. And so, but either way, all three of them are available to download, especially to the Nintendo Switch. There is, however, a bit of a controversy in regards to that one, and that has to do with the fact that before you could play Doom 1 and 2, you have to log into Bethesda.net, and that caused a bit of an outrage, and that not everyone is a big supportive of that decision, though. However, Bethesda has responded to this, and a report from Eurogamer, again, the link will be in the description of this video, of this YouTube video to be exact. They recently gave an update and they put it out on a tweet that reads, quote, "Update on our new classic Doom release. The Bethesda.net login requirement was included for the Slayer Club to reward members for playing the classic Doom game. The login should be optional, and we are working on changing the requirement to optional now." So while that is certainly great that Bethesda is addressing this, though, this should not have happened in the first place. Consumers should not have been forced to log into Bethesda.net to play the classic Doom, for crying out loud. I don't know whose idea was it to put it out with that situation, or if they thought they could get away with it but somehow were caught with their pants down, or if this was an error on Bethesda's part. But either case, this should never have happened, though. So while I applaud Bethesda for actually addressing this problem and planning to fix it, though, I can understand people's right to be angry, not to mention making fun of this whole situation, that this whole thing should not have existed in the first place, though. Alright, with that out of the way, we'll get started with our review of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Now, in March 2015, the original creator of one of my favorite Castlevania games of all time, Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the original PlayStation, I rank it at number 6 on my favorite list of video games of all time, though. It definitely caught a lot of people's attention, along with other games like Ukulele at the time, and of course Mighty Number 9. Of course, we all know what happened with Mighty Number 9 and the debacle of the mess that came out, though. Was an interesting Kickstarter that caught people's attention. It was a return to the person who helped create a genre that would come out from Symphony of the Night, which is basically the metroidvania genre. And ever since then, we've had plenty of games that have looked like metroidvania style. And while some of them are good and some of them are enjoyable, like Time Spinner, The Mummy Demaster, and so forth, we never got really got another entry into the whole Castlevania games using the Metroidvania style. As well, knowing Konami, they started to move away from that and doing other things, and Konami being Konami, and Konami's the worst, and so forth. So after many years of, let's see, 15, 16, 17, about 4 years later, after the original Kickstarter, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night finally gets released on all systems. So the Switch version came a little bit later. And with the Switch version, it was kind of interesting because there were a lot of people that were not happy with a lot of the stuff that was announced, like 720p dynamic resolution, 30 frames per second. And there were people who complained about it being broken, buggy, there was a lag input and all that stuff. And after spending like a couple of weeks with the game, I honestly will have to say that the Switch version is not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be, but I will acknowledge it's far from 100% perfect. So why don't we get started with our pros and cons, and we'll start off with the first part, the pros. And the first one has to do with the gameplay. As always, the game is, since this game is created by the same person who helped create the Castlevania Symphony of the Night game, the game has that classic Metroidvania gameplay feel. If anybody who's played a Metroid game will know what that means. I mean, it's even though it's in a 2D kind of setting, there's a lot of exploration in the game. Some areas cannot be accessed until like a little bit later when you get a certain power-up or a certain ability, and you'll be able to access some of these areas to finding hidden secrets here and there. So it follows that classic Metroidvania gameplay. What's also interesting is that it does borrow elements from certainly other Metroidvania style games. Like, for example, you do have there are certain elements they borrow from the Nintendo DS release of Castlevania Dawns of Sorrow, where your character Miriam, if I'm saying her name correctly though, has the ability to, when she defeats enemies, to use their abilities, to even the ability to basically switch between different weapons, which can come in handy though, because you have different varieties of weapons to choose from, like a great sword or a short sword or a spear, gun, whip. You could do kung fu and kicking and all that stuff. So there's different play styles and all that stuff, and you can switch between them when you get these certain crystals. Not to mention certain crystals that can actually act as a helper, like a knight that will help you attack certain enemies and so forth. So it follows the classic Metroid gameplay, and it borrows certain elements from other Metroidvania style type of games. Next thing I want to talk about is the music, and the music is pretty good in this game. There's certainly, it has a nice little tune to it. There are some areas where the classical music kicks in and it sounds like really, really good. So from a music point though, the music sounds nice. It's still enjoyable. There are some nice tunes. There are some areas where I like the music the most. I think some of it, like the underground. Some of the areas when you're in what looks like a church-like setting that has the music has sort of a interesting take on it. So music-wise, it's good. And last but not least, I do want to talk about is the Switch version of Bloodstained. Now, as I said earlier, there have been people who have talked about how the Switch version being the worst version out there. Like, it's broken, it's buggy, there's input lag, and so forth. All I can say about that is this. Based on my time with the game, even after getting the updates and so forth, the Switch version, based on my time, seems to run very well. Input seems to be run perfectly fine and all that stuff. And I haven't really experienced any major issues. Nothing like where the game crashed or the game kicked me out or anything like that. So as far as based on my time with the game goes, the Switch version runs okay. I haven't really had any really major problems with it or anything like that. I can't speak for everyone. I'm sure there are people who might have problems with the Switch version, but as far as I can tell, I really didn't have any issues with the Switch version of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get to part 2, the cons, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from Quentin Tarantino. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of our video review of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night for the Nintendo Switch. The game is also available on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. So now that I gave you the pros, why don't we get started with the cons? And we'll start with the first one. Now, as I mentioned at the end of when I talked about the pros, I talked about how I thought the Switch version was okay, and I still stand behind it. The game still ran okay. I didn't have any experience with the game crashing or breaking down. I didn't experience any input lag as far as I'm aware of. Having said all that, that doesn't mean it's a perfect port, and it's far from being perfect though. Some of the issues I ran into in some of the later stages, one of the areas is the twirling tower. When in portable mode, I noticed the frame rate kind of taking a little bit of a hit though. While it didn't make the game unplayable in any way, it was noticeable, however. So there are certainly some frame rate issues in certain areas though when you're playing the game. And as far as the visuals go, it's okay. I mean, there are some areas that look nice, and I understand the Switch isn't the most powerful system out there, but I will admit the visuals could have been better. I mean, especially when you look at a game like Doom and Wolfenstein, games that are graphically demanding, and those games can run on the Switch. Granted, they can only run at 720p 30 frames per second, but nevertheless, the fact that those games can still look impressive and still run on the Switch, yeah. And not to mention the story about how the Switch version wasn't a priority to them at all, and now seeing how the games did well, obviously they may have to rethink that and all that stuff, but again, it's not a bad port or anything like that, but it's far from a perfect port on the Nintendo Switch. The next thing I do want to talk about is the side quests, and for me, the side quests are kind of a hit and miss. Earlier on in the game, you'll meet several different characters. One requires you to find an item for her, and she'll give you something. Another one has you attacking certain creatures, while one asks you to make food and all that stuff. In the game, you can basically craft items ranging from food to weapons to even potions and all that stuff. And all these side quests aren't necessarily bad, but they're not exactly 100% great. Most of them will give you items and armor and weapon, and while that's okay in some cases, sometimes they'll give you weapons that are more powerful than the current weapons you have. Sometimes they'll give you items that are like weaker than the than what you're wearing and all that stuff, or what you're using right now. And I do wish to some degree, at least based on my time with it, that they will give you like any more experience points to even using or give you in-game currencies and so forth. So it's the side quests, some of them are kind of hit and miss though. They're not terrible, but they're not great either, to be exact. And last but not least, and this applies to really the Switch version, and that is the fact that the game does run at 30 frames per second. Compare that to the other versions, which run at 60 frames per second and all. Now, I will say it's not terrible that the game's running at 30 frames per second. It runs fine, especially on the Nintendo Switch. Even at 30 frames per second isn't necessarily bad. That said, I will admit that I do wish they were able to get the game running at 60 frames per second. even at like a lower resolution. Hell, I would settle with if they had like a graphical option, like having the game like at 1080p but at 30 frames per second, or 720p at 60 frames per second. I mean, games like Fire Emblem Warriors and Darksiders War Master Edition, a remake of the PlayStation 3 Darksiders, had a graphical option as well. And it's really a shame that the Switch version of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night didn't have that, though. So again, 30 frames per second isn't necessarily bad, but I won't deny the fact that it would have been nice if they had put 60 frames per second in the game, or at least gave us like a graphical option where we have it at a lower resolution but running at a good 60 frames per second, though. Overall, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is still a fun game, nevertheless. It's a return of the classic Metroidvania game that we've been sorely missing because, well, most AAA developers don't pay much attention to that, though. And the gameplay is still fun. It follows that classic Metroidvania gameplay feel to it, borrowing certain elements from other games as well. And the game is just enjoyable, fun, and addictive, though. The Switch version is sort of a controversial one, though. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people made it out to be, but I will admit, though, that there are certainly some issues that they should have addressed it, though. And the visuals, while not terrible, they're far from perfect, though. And there are some frame rate issues I saw in portable mode that, well, didn't ruin the game, but ultimately were noticeable, to be exact. All right. And other than that, though, also the fact that the game running at 30 frames per second, though, compared to the Xbox One, PS4, and PC, which has at 60 frames, I will admit that it's kind of a disappointment. Again, it doesn't ruin the game. It's just unfortunate that they made it at basically 60 frames, at 30 frames per second, and all that stuff. But other than that, though, I'm still enjoying the game. Nevertheless, though, I'm hoping that the game does well enough to maybe we'll see a sequel. And if that does happen, and if they do bring it to the Switch, maybe they'll actually put some effort into the Switch version as well, just as much as they put in the other version. So overall, I still enjoy the game. The Switch version isn't as bad as many people made it out to be, but if you're looking for the best looking version, obviously you're going to look at the PS4, the Xbox One, or the PC. Alright, before I end this video, I want to give my thoughts on the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is the new movie from Quentin Tarantino. I just recently saw it in theaters, though, and I honestly have to say, it's different. It's a little bit different than from the other Quentin Tarantino's movies that I've seen, whether it was Pulp Fiction or Django Unchained, I believe that is, and I think it was the other one, The Hateful Eight. I'm not sure if that's the name or anything like that. So it certainly is a little bit different, but you still get a sense of that Quentin Tarantino feel about it. It basically stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie is in it as well, and Al Pacino, and even the late Luke Perry is in this movie. Too. It's about, it follows Leonardo DiCaprio's character. Shoot, I forgot his name and all. As he basically, does different films, including mostly like westerns and so forth, though. And there are certainly some funny moments in the movie. One scene is when Brad Pitt's character is in a fight with a character the person who plays Bruce Lee, and that scene was pretty funny. I was kind of laughing at it. The thing is that it doesn't really pick up until near the end of the movie, where you see the scenes that plays off like, yep, that's like classic Quentin Tarantino right there. So it really does, to me, I feel like it didn't really pick up until very near the end of the movie. But overall, I would say, as far as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood goes, it's different, but it was still enjoyable, nevertheless. And it's worth, taking a look at it. Just it doesn't come off as like the other movies Quentin Tarantino has done. At least that's how I'm looking at it, though. Okay, this concludes this video review of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night for the Nintendo Switch, plus my thoughts on the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and my thoughts on Doom 1, 2, and 3 being released. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about Bloodstained Ritual of the Night? Do you think it's a good spiritual successor to Castlevania Symphony of the Night? Do you think after all these years waiting, it finally lives up to its expectations? Do you think the Switch version is as bad as many people made it out to be? Or you don't think it's as bad as a lot of people had already made it out to be? What are your thoughts about Bethesda releasing Doom 1, 2, and 3 on the PS4 and for the Nintendo Switch? Were these games you were looking forward to picking up? Do you think Bethesda made a mistake putting a login for Bethesda.net? Do you think that was intentional, or do you think that was an error on Bethesda's part? And what are your thoughts about Quentin Tarantino's movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Do you think the movie is good? Do you think it has that Quentin Tarantino look and feel to it? Do you think it's as good as his other movies? Or do you think his other movies were better than this one? Did you like what I said in this video? Did you not like what I said? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off on the comment section below and let me know what you think. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I would hope you hit that like button. I would appreciate it if you enjoy this video. And if you do, and I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You could do it through PayPal me or Patreon. Links will be in the description of this YouTube video. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, excuse me, I wish you all a good day then. Bye!